Whether you're a believer, a skeptic, or somewhere in between, the chances are you have encountered something you can't explain. The accounts in this video are real testimonies shared by people who are still trying to process what they went through. Some of them have spent years trying to rationalize these events with a scientific mind, only to find that logic simply couldn't cover it. I've set these stories against a quiet, rain-soaked graveyard ambience created in Unreal Engine 5. So, make yourself comfortable. Let's get right into the first account. I hope you're ready for this. I lived in Adams, Tennessee growing up from ages 14 to 18, 2004 to 2008. A couple of weeks after my family and I moved there, something unexpected happened. I was mowing on my dad's tractor with a big 8-foot wide back end mower. I was going down a hill when my horizon line violently was thrown around as the tractor tires hit something. I disengaged the mower, pulled the tractor around at the base of the hill I'd just gone down. My blood went cold as I looked up through the swathe I just cut, like a buzzer going down the middle of someone's head, making a lane in the grass. In that lane were 4 Native American burial graves. My parents started reaching out to anyone who might be able to help us identify the graves: anthropologists, historians, accredited people, etc. Those people unanimously agreed that these 4 graves were from the Trail of Tears. They corroborated this from what I remember because of how the graves were laid, very, very shallow, with a giant slab of stone where a gravestone would be. The fact that they were interred on a hillside to keep the water from sinking in and raising the bodies, since they had to bury them so quickly, and many other reasons. I consider myself a very logically driven and rationally minded person. Basically, I let my empirical senses try to explain something before I'll open myself to other possibilities. Yet, there were things that happened to me and my family that we weren't able to rationalize with a scientific mindset or anything logical. Event 1. The activity in our house started shortly after the mowing incident. We heard heavy knocking and pounding on the brick outer wall of the house. Encircling the house, no matter where you were in the house, you could hear the knocking. Some nights, I would hear running footsteps accompanying the pounding. This activity happened nearly every night. As the nights passed, I started feeling a heavy presence in my room, a suffocating one, like a heavy weight sitting on my solar plexus constantly. Whatever was happening decided to latch onto me. Event 2. Things continued to escalate. One night, I was letting my golden retriever out to go pee. We had a ranch-style house overlooking the Red River. The door we were exiting was on the back side of the house facing the river. As I open the door, I start hearing faint whispering, something akin to leaves being blown or scratching across the ground. I look up at the trees to see if the wind was blowing. Everything was perfectly still. It was fall in Tennessee, so tons of leaves were on the ground. They were not moving either. The scratching/blowing leaf noise continued, but as it continued, it grew closer and louder. It sounded like a language of some sort, like how you'd imagine an incantation or something nefarious in the tone of the sound. I looked down at my golden retriever. All of the hair on her back was standing up, and she was snarling like a rabid wolf, yet not barking, just kind of frozen in a fear response. I started getting extremely nauseous and could smell sulfur. I was completely frozen when my dog launches herself through the door's threshold and starts gnashing her teeth mid-air, snarling and chomping. The voices were now coming from directly in front of me. I could hear them as if someone was standing there a foot or 2 away. I grab my dog mid-air and pull her quickly inside, slammed the door, and threw the deadbolt into place. The door frame shook violently as a vicious pounding started hammering on the threshold. I ran with my dog to the center of the house, flipping on every light along the way. We sat there alone all night, until the sun came up. Ginger, my golden retriever, laid across my lap the entire night, pressing into me while she whimpered for hours. All I could do was pet her and try to calm her down, which was also helping me downregulate. This was impossible though. The entire night until sunrise, the back door was thumping. Event 3. It happened when I was coming home from football practice. I had all my gear in a gym bag over my left shoulder. This is important because of how I entered the house. As I closed the front door behind me, I began sitting down the gear bag from my left shoulder, which caused me to look right. The room when you first walked in was our library, where we had a leather couch, chair, piano, bookshelves, and a wooden rocking chair. There was something sitting in the rocking chair. My peripheral vision caught it first, the chair going back and forth. As my vision centered on the chair, there was a humanoid-looking shape sitting there, head down, glancing downward at the book it was holding. Long black hair drawn over its head and completely void of light. To picture what I saw, imagine the silhouette of a person, but rather a void of light. The light coming in around the edges of it seemed to be eaten up by the presence or void. As the light spilled over the contour edges of the humanoid shape, it felt like I'd jumped off a bridge into ice-cold water. I blasted myself backwards against the door, screaming, and fell down. As I was falling, I saw the void blur suddenly as it shot across the wall of the house and out through a huge bay window overlooking the river. My golden retriever was in the next room, and she sprinted to chase the shadow across the walls, barking and clawing at the walls. After it left through the window, my dog came back to me and laid down on my lap until my parents got home. Event 4. I was fishing with my cousin Jack on the river by our house. We were right on the bend of a river, so the moon would be shining on both sides of the river, racing out at two lines like a 90-degree angle from the house. It was really beautiful when you weren't on edge. The reason I bring this up, there was a lot of light on the river that evening. Jack was about 10 or so at the time. He reaches up and taps me. "Does that lady need help?" he asks. I looked to where he was pointing, and there was a pale woman dressed in white clothes going back and forth, picking up stones just to the left of us across the river. I had seen her many times before around the property, and whenever I would get close, she would disappear behind a tree, or something similar would happen. Knowing this, I told Jack as calmly as I could that it was time for dinner, and he needed to go up to my mom immediately. When I walked him up and made sure he was on his way, I looked back over, and she was gone, but I could hear a splashing in the water below. Event 5. Myself, my dad, his friends, and some other family members were staked out along the river bend on the gravel bar beneath the rise to our house. Nothing out of the ordinary at first. It was July 4th, and we were having an actual good time for a change. We were all spread out about 15 yards from each other. Each man had a low-end gas Coleman lantern. As the sun was setting, my dad looks over at me like something was bugging him. He told me later he felt like someone had just thrown a bucket of ice water over him before it began. The sun had just gone down when this happened. In unison, all the lanterns were cranked up full blast, then just as quickly became barely a flame. Then the fires roared to life again, down to barely just a flame. Roared to life, then they went completely out. Right as the flames went out, we heard the most godforsaken scream by some woman across the river. Whatever it was kept on screaming, despite our best attempts to call out to help. As her scream reached a crescendo, it sounded like what I could only imagine a person's throat being cut interrupted her scream. The sound of a deadweight fall of a human body tumbled down the hillside across from us and splashed violently into the water. At this point, all the guys had their flashlights out. That's when something started swimming and splashing around in the water on both sides of the river bend. The splashing receded towards the opposite gravel bar, and whatever it was got out and started pacing back and forth across the rocks there. We were pointing all of our flashlights to where the sound was coming from, but we couldn't identify where it was originating. It's safe to say we were running up the hill at this point. We all got inside the house, locked the doors, then gathered in the central living room. Nobody wanted to leave for fear of what was outside. We all stayed up that night because the wall pounding was more violent than it had ever been. Bam, 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 all night like the ticking of some demonic clock. I didn't sleep for 2 days after this event. Event 6, Lost Time. I was walking through the woods near the Bell Witch Cave. One moment it was completely sunny and blue skies at about mid-afternoon. The next moment it was overcast and looked like maybe 4 p.m. Event 7, Night Terrors. Torture dreams, being held down and brutally drawn and quartered. Dreams of walking through the house and the void person placing their hand on my chest and pushing through my solar plexus, body violently shaking in the dream like having a seizure. Event 8, visited the Bell House / plantation marker in a tobacco field adjacent to my family's property. I brought some friends to try and prove that something crazy was happening to my family. The rite of passage in the area is to go to the stone marker where the paranormal events happened hundreds of years ago, then dance on the stone saying, "I don't believe in the Bell Witch." I got them to promise that they wouldn't do that while we went. Of course, the moment we get there, one guy who doubted the legends in a massive way jumps up onto the stone marker and starts screaming, "I don't believe in the Bell Witch," as loud as he could. I get so upset at him. I'm the only one who knows the way back, so I said, "Come on guys, we're leaving." In this area, it's known as the Tennessee River Valley, so there's tons of flowing water and whatnot around these tobacco fields. The reason this is important is because of what happened next. We're making good time walking back across this crop field, hundreds of yards long. A mist starts rolling in from the river bends and begins to saturate the field. The temperature easily drops to 25 degrees or so, and we start seeing our breath. I begin to smell sulfur in the breeze. As the mist became a fog, it began. I start hearing this wheezy and deeply cavernous sounding breath around us, like being inside a cave that was breathing. Out of nowhere, we start hearing these giant blasting sounds, and I realized something was walking on the chopped tobacco stalks. When you step on said stalks, they disintegrate in a very loud way as they burst apart. This starts happening all around us, like an army of native spirits running around, as if we were engaged in bandwagon battle. The blasts were coming from every single direction in the fog. That's when I hear it. That deep, cavernous noise turns into this giant sniffing sound, like some Lovecraftian beast smelling its prey just out of sight. At this point, I yell, "Run!" in pure panic mode. We take off across the field, trying not to trip and be skewered on the stalks. They dry out and get really sharp where they harvest them. Also, Robertson County is the largest producer of tobacco per square mile, so these fields are everywhere. Fun fact. As we're exiting the field and our feet hit the gravel road, the lower part of my back suddenly explodes in agony. I look down, and there's this massive rock laying at my feet, and I realized that I'd just been assaulted. By the time I got to my house and examined my back in a mirror, the bruise was about the size of a basketball and was already turning black. Event 8. I woke up outside at about 3 in the morning. I was laying next to the 4 graves on the property. The night was awfully cold, but I woke up soaked in sweat. We lived there for so long that I have many events to share, processes, and I'm willing to have a discussion about my time there with you all. It's really hard for me to talk about this without re-traumatizing myself, but my friends and family are encouraging me to share my experiences with like-minded people so I can try to find peace surrounding my trauma. Thank you for listening. This story dates back to the late 90s. I was 15 at the time, living in Bournemouth in the UK with my family. My parents purchased a Victorian 9-bedroom hotel, and we moved into the hotel owner's accommodation. My parents had their room on the ground floor, and my brother and I had a room each in the basement. The hotel was a nice place. It had a happy feel to it, except in certain areas. There was one room, room 7, on the top floor, that had a strange vibe when inside it. Whilst cleaning this room, there was a closeness, as if all the air around was closing in on you, and a ring in your ears that only really became apparent when you left the room itself. I always kept the door open when I had to work on this room, and was happy when I got to leave. We will come back to this room later. Within the first few months living in the hotel, it was apparent to the whole family that things were happening that could not be explained by everyday logic. The large old doors around the hotel were heavy and had been fitted with auto closers for fire safety reasons. This made it generally difficult to open them at times, particularly when carrying trays and hotel supplies. However, often we would be walking through parts of the hotel and a door would swing open. We would expect someone to walk out of the connecting room, but there would be no one there. Another occurrence experienced by my entire family at some point or another was the feeling of being hit by a sudden gust of wind, even when in a room with all the doors and windows closed. We're not talking about a little breeze. This was like someone held a large rotary fan up to our face and put it on maximum power. Then, after the wind stopped, there would be a strong smell of a gingery aftershave. The first major incident we had involved room 7. A couple and their 10-year-old daughter were staying in the room. After dinner, the parents went to the bar for some drinks, but the daughter was bored and wanted to go watch TV in their room, so she did. All was fine, until another guest entered the bar area and asked if anyone was staying in room 7, as they could hear someone screaming in that room. My parents and the girl's parents ran upstairs, and they went into the room and found the daughter sitting up in bed in floods of tears. When asked what was wrong, she said she had fallen asleep and then woke up to see a man standing in the room. My parents asked what the man looked like, thinking it was one of the other guests in the hotel, but the description she gave was of a tall man wearing a top hat, and that he had hair down the sides of his face, but not a beard. She effectively described a Victorian man with sideburns. Her parents asked where he went, but she didn't know. When she woke up, he told her to stay in bed and go back to sleep. That is when she started screaming, and when she looked back up, he was gone. They searched the hotel, but no one was found, and none of the guests came close to matching that description. They put it down to a bad dream, but my family was sure there was more to it than that. Not that we ever talked to the guests about the supernatural occurrences. We figured it would cause more issues if people actively knew. It was a few months before the next sighting. The ground floor layout of the hotel was quite basic. There was a main lobby area, and off from that were the different rooms: lounge, dining room, kitchen, etc. The bar was part of an old extension only accessible through the dining room. This meant that if you were sat in a certain position in the bar, you could see directly through the dining room and into the main lobby and stairs area. The guest was sat having a drink in that exact spot. when she turned to my mom standing behind the bar and excitedly said, "Oh, you have a wedding party in." My mom was confused and asked what the guest was referring to. The guest said that a man wearing a full top hat and tails had just walked down the stairs. My mom moved around beside the bar and looked out the window towards the entrance of the hotel, at which point the guest said, "He didn't go that way. He went down to the right side of the stairs." What the guest didn't know was that the right side of the stairs led to our private quarters. My mom and dad went to check, but there was no one there, and although there were ways out of the building, they were locked and bolted from the inside, so no one could have exited through them without it showing. Another common occurrence in the hotel would be the sound of running. When on the ground floor, you would hear running upstairs. This was not surprising when the hotel had guests. In an old Victorian hotel, every sound was heard and magnified. But over the Christmas break, we would shut the upper floors of the hotel and just have family time. But the running around would still continue. It was so loud at one point that we were sure someone had broken in. My brother, dad, and I even went upstairs clutching kitchen knives for safety. But after unlocking and checking the rooms, no one was up there. A guest started staying long-term at the hotel. I don't recall what his job was, but he had business some of the year in Bournemouth, and certain other days he had to travel to London. On London days, he would need to be out of the hotel by 5 a.m. My mom would leave him out a continental breakfast. He would help himself to it and would be gone before we woke up, returning later in the evening. One day when returning from London, he was chatting to my parents, and he said something strange had happened when he left the hotel that morning. He had come out of his room as usual and was surprised to see a boy stood on the half landing leading up to the top floor of the hotel. The man was not used to seeing someone else up at 4:30 a.m., but being polite, he said good morning to the boy. He said the boy did not say anything. Instead, he just turned and slowly walked up to the top floor. The man thought it was strange, but carried on with his normal morning routine. My parents were puzzled by this and asked him what the boy had looked like. He said he was around 8 to 9 years old, but could not recall what the boy was wearing. The reason my parents were confused was because at the time we had no children staying in the hotel. Many months later, whilst serving breakfast, a guest came into the dining room and quite loudly asked my mom, "Is this hotel haunted?" All the other guests stopped eating, intrigued by the question, and even more so by what the answer would be. My mom played it cool, simply saying, "Why do you ask?" The lady implied that she'd woken up in the night and there was a boy stood in her room. She said hello to the boy, and he vanished. My mom acted surprised and said it was the first she'd heard of anything like that. Again, playing it down in front of all the other listening ears. The final incident involved me. I had been saving my money up to buy a watch. I had finally managed to get enough money together, and I had made my way to town to pick up the watch. It was my first ever expensive purchase. When it was time to go to bed, I took the watch off and went to put it on the bedside table. However, in each room, there were internal phones next to the bed. This was in case my parents needed our help or guests were checking in, so we could be called to assist. The bedside table in my room was so small, the phone took up all the space. For that reason, I decided to lay the watch over the receiver of the phone and hope no one called me in the night. My bed was one of those large metal bunk beds. It had a single bed at the top and a sofa bed below that folded out into a small double. I slept on the bottom, partly because it was a double, but realistically, because the ceiling was so low, you could not physically sleep up there anyway. I remember being woken up in the night to the loudest clanging metal sound as my whole bed shook. It felt and sounded as though someone had taken a run and jump. and landed on the metal ladder of the bed. I was facing the wall at the time and remember the utter fear I felt. I would say it's the only time in my life I've ever been frozen in fear. No part of me would move. I just lay there, too scared to turn over and see what had caused the entire bed to shake. I'm not sure I would have been able to call for my brother, but he was away at PGL summer camp, so he couldn't have helped me anyway. I lay there for hours, just staring at that wall. Finally, the light shone down the basement window and filled my room. I plucked up the courage to turn and look, and thankfully, there was nothing there. I sat up in bed, and the first thing I noticed was that the watch was gone from on top of the phone. I searched around on the floor, thinking maybe it had slid off. Then I thought about the noise my bed had made, as if someone had jumped on it. Slowly peering up to the top bed. There, in the middle of the mattress, was my watch. I guess the little boy had wanted to play with it, too. My mom went on to research the local history of the hotel. She was able to find out that a doctor had lived there when it was first built as a house, and during the time there, a young boy had died from an illness, but I can't remember the exact details of how. We owned the hotel for many years before selling it. It was later converted into flats, and I often wonder if they still have any occurrences. This took place in Colorado. This weed farm itself was way off the beaten path, which was perfect for growing a crop people like to steal, and made it interesting for the only security guard there at night. It was apparently used to grow beans throughout the 1900s, before some bright-eyed entrepreneurs bought it to get a foot in the cannabis business. It's completely surrounded by woods on all sides. Upon entering the complex, you're met with several old farmhouses. Only one was used for offices, while the other two were just storage. This was called the admin area and is on the north end of the property. To the east, west, and south, you have 3 growing fields, all approximately 100 acres. Just past the admin area, you had 7 greenhouses encompassed by a fence and a large garage attached to it that was used to house greenhouse supplies. Across the lot from that, another garage for farming equipment, so a very large area for one lone security guard. Now, this was a brand new contract, so I had no one to show me around, and was basically tasked with creating security procedure for the other guards to follow. To that end, I was working 7 days a week, 4 p.m. to 6 a.m., until I had everything ironed out. My first day, I do a walkthrough of the place with my boss and the farm owner, then was left on my own to figure it out. Thankfully, I did have a decent little office in the admin building, and they even had an 8-channel security system set up. So weeks go by, and nothing weird has happened, not even an off feeling. If anything, it was beyond peaceful. I figured out a good security routine and made a policy out of it for new guards to follow. After that, life was easy. I do my checks, read fanfic, watch YouTube, glance at cameras, repeat. I was doing just that at about 2 a.m. when I see a black mass jump over the greenhouse fence. I bolt up, lock my office, and run down there, weapon drawn. Now that may seem like a dramatic response, but I should be the only person for literally miles around. The main road is the only way in by vehicle, and it's gated. Plus, the gate is right next to my office, so I would have seen or heard someone approach by vehicle. And foot traffic at that hour and in that location, well, it's probably not the mailman. I get to the greenhouse area gate and quietly let myself in. I start checking greenhouses one by one. After about 20 minutes, I find absolutely nothing. I find the camera in question and looked around the area, but I found nothing out of place. I end up doing my entire security check early just to be sure. I then head back to my office. I plan to review the footage because the fence is 8 foot tall with an additional foot of barbed wire across the top. That in itself freaks me out because I've been outside for over an hour before I realize the only thing that can clear that jump is a mountain lion. So I hustled back to my office, but my monitor is black. No signal found. The hard drive in the brand new DVR is fried. At this point it's weird, but not necessarily paranormal. A few days go by. We get the hard drive replaced and all is well. It's probably around midnight, and I'm doing my checks by the backside of the greenhouse area when out of nowhere, a blood-curdling scream, and it's damn close. My body goes cold. This very well could be the big cat I suspected from a few nights earlier. I find the nearest gate and let myself into the greenhouse area. Better in there than out in the open. But then I hear crying. Unmistakably female, diaphragm shaking, snot-slinging weeping. That's not a cat. I almost wish it was. But I have to look. That's my job. Now, behind the greenhouse area, there's a dirt road in front of the center field that circles all the way around it. This road connects to the perimeter roads for the 2 side fields. Think of 3 big circles arranged in the loose shape of a triangle with the greenhouses in the middle. Well, this crying sounded like it was coming from that center road. I start to approach very slowly and can still hear it as clear as day. It's getting louder and louder the closer I get. It's almost nightmarish, until it just stops. So I stop. I stayed there completely still for quite a long time, but there was nothing. People don't just stop sobbing. There's at least sniffling, maybe that hiccuping thing when you try to catch your breath, but it just went from wailing to nothing in one beat. After that, I always felt uncomfortable toward that back field. I heard the scream several more times after that, always around midnight, and always from that same area, but I never went to investigate after my initial experience. By this time, harvest has come and gone, and the fields are bare. I'm still needed, however, because they use the greenhouses throughout the winter. As the seasons change, so did my responsibilities. Rather than patrolling the fields, my focus was the greenhouses. Not just for theft, but also ensuring that the heaters continue to work throughout the cold nights. To this end, I took to parking my Jeep next to the greenhouse area so I didn't have to make the long trek through the snow from the security office to the greenhouses. I could see everything I needed to from my driver's seat, and my Jeep heater was infinitely better than the little space heater in my office. I had a routine. Start the Jeep, get it nice and hot, then turn it off. I kept my windows cracked because security work at night is 50% listening for weird shit. I didn't have to listen hard. A loud bang immediately removed any drowsiness I may have had. Something just hit my vehicle. I don't get out immediately. I took a good look around, listened for footsteps, and checked my mirrors frantically, but there's nothing. Then it happens again. Bang, on the roof of my Jeep, and dirt tumbles down my windshield. Someone's throwing dirt clumps at me. I call my supervisor and explain what's going on, and she says she's on her way and will be there in about half an hour, as she's working at another farm not too far away. I reach to the passenger seat and grab my spotlight, the big kind of spotlight, 1,000 lumens, and allows me to see the back of every field. The kind of spotlight that will land you in jail if you shine it at a plane. I hop out of my Jeep and climb on the roof. It had to have come from the back field. I began panning back and forth with my handheld beam of daylight. I don't immediately see anyone, so I start with verbal commands. Come out. You're trespassing. Announce yourself. I'm authorized to use lethal force. Yada yada. There's no response. I stay posted up until my supervisor arrives. We decide to walk the perimeter of all 3 fields, and found absolutely nothing. By this time, it's almost 3 a.m., and we were back at my Jeep talking and smoking. Then, a whistle, kind of like that playful two-tone whistle that says, "I'm over here." My supervisor just gave me this look like, seriously. I told her that's the kind of thing I deal with at this place. She stuck around for the rest of the shift, but nothing else happened. It stayed quiet until Christmas Day when I picked up a shift for that sweet holiday pay. I opted to stay in the office for the sake of my Jeep. That's when the music started. Long, flowing classical music that you might hear playing quietly at a fancy party. I listened, then stood up and listened some more. I walked to the doorway of the security office and stopped to listen again. It's still there. I stepped out, and it stops. I pause to a dead silence. I step back into my office, and I can hear it again. I poke my head out, and it stops. I lean back in, and it starts again. It was almost cartoonish. It went on for quite a while, and gradually faded away. There's nothing in that old building that plays music. No radio, PA systems, and no one had forgotten a cell phone. It wasn't my phone, as I'd actually tried to record it, but I picked up nothing but white noise. I walked outside on the off chance it was coming from miles away, but nothing. I only ever heard that music on Christmas Day. After that, I'd actually gotten permission to bring my husky to work, and he loved the farm, especially in the snow. But some nights, he wouldn't leave my side. He would actually growl at things I had no perception of, which you know is strange if you own a husky. The strangest thing about that place was you could just tell it was going to be a normal night or not when you got there. Some days the atmosphere was just different. A lot of other things happened there, but those weren't the big ones. If I get a decent response, I may share a few more stories from my time in the Marines or during my time as a cop. Thank you for listening. A couple of years ago, I babysat for a family friend. She and her husband lived with their 2 kids, a girl about 7 called Kay, and a boy about 12 called Jay. I babysat these kids so much that we became very close, brother and sisters type of deal. They weren't difficult kids. They had a hard home life because their parents were borderline abusive, but they still were good kids. I tried my best to be a positive adult in their life. I was 18 to 19 during this. The family moved around a lot. I've known them now for over 6 years, and they have moved every single year. This experience happened in 2015. I was halfway through my senior year when the family moved into the house. It was nice, just built in 2013 or something like that. A nice neighborhood, but rent was really low. The mother often bragged about the steal of a deal she got from the house. To put in perspective, the average rent in this area is about $1,200 just for an apartment. These guys got a whole 2-story house, 3 beds, 4 baths, freshly built in a nice neighborhood for about $650. I thought that was weird and asked if there was anything wrong with the house, to which she replied the inspection came back clear. I didn't think much beyond that. I started babysitting, and I immediately felt something was off. I have anxiety, so going to a new place really puts me in a funk, so I just figured that's what it was at first. The way the home is set is important. On the bottom floor, they had a living room, dining area, and a kitchen with some other rooms. I spent most of my time in the living room, working on things for school, while the kids were upstairs playing games or with their friends. While you're in the living room, there's a wall that blocks you from seeing the stairs. Upstairs, there are bedrooms. Immediately off the stairs and above the living room is the parents' room, which was off limits to the kids. Then a loft area that looks down over the front door to make a grand foyer feeling. There's a light that can be on, which can be seen from downstairs because of the loft. Then the kids' bedrooms were down a hallway. Now, let's get into the experiences. Nothing happened really at first that was too mind-boggling. Little noises here and there, knocks on the walls, things being misplaced, lights flickering, but nothing that made me think ghosts. I figured they got what they paid for, and my memory was garbage. After a couple of months of that, things started picking up. The kids, who were usually very sweet and kind to each other, started becoming noticeably more snappy to everyone, especially Jay. He had complained about nightmares he had started having about someone standing in his doorway watching him. His parents wouldn't listen though. Their behavior grew even worse as time went on. It was a weekend, and the parents were going to be gone for a while. The kids were upstairs doing their thing. I was downstairs in the living room, looking at a pizza to order for lunch. Out of nowhere, I hear really loud footsteps coming from above me in the parents' bedroom, thunderous even. Thinking it was the kids being little dingus meats, I immediately headed upstairs to tell them to get out, but I was greeted with the two kids standing in their doorways, staring at the closed door to their parents' room. The footsteps/bangs still continuing inside. At this point, I thought it was an intruder and instructed the kids to get into their rooms and lock their doors. I called 911 and explained the situation. As I stayed on the phone, the footsteps continued to walk around the room. I could hear it moving to different locations of the room. 2 officers arrived, so I grabbed the kids and we waited outside, the banging still continuing as one of the officers escorted us out. They came out empty-handed and said nothing was there, and that it may have been something with the door because the banging stopped as soon as they opened the door. I had felt the shaking of the floor moving around the room, so I knew it wasn't the door. But I guess, in my denial, I ignored it and took the kids out for ice cream, trying not to think about it. Another time, the kids and I were sitting in the dining area eating dinner. It was only 3 of us in the house, and from the dining area, you could see the light upstairs was on, and it cast a shadow onto the front door. I was making a joke about how I'm the only one who knows how to turn off a light around here, and I saw a shadow of a hand from upstairs on the front door, and I think that's when it really started settling down with me, that the house was haunted. The kids didn't see it, and I didn't tell them. I figured it would just add stress they didn't need. I told the parents that night when they came home, but they brushed me off, saying they haven't experienced anything. This continued on for a while. I would experience something, the kids would, but the parents wouldn't believe any of us. It was summer just after I graduated high school. I remember it vividly because I was awake reading articles about a huge shooting that happened in my town. That's when the banging from upstairs started happening. I was used to it at this point, but what I was not used to was the banging footsteps coming down the stairs. These steps were methodical and menacing. I felt terrible energy in the room, and it was cold despite it being in the middle of summer in the south. I counted the seconds between steps, and it was 5, every single time. I called out to the kids and told them to stop joking around, but I knew it was not the kids. I was terrified. The footsteps stopped at the bottom of the stairs, and I couldn't see who was there. Then I saw an apparition. It was of a little girl. She had brunette hair and a red dress. She looked innocent enough, but the energy in the room was so heavy I almost threw up. She looked at me, and I looked at her. She didn't move. I figured I was hallucinating and began rubbing my eyes, but when I finished rubbing them, she was right in front of me. In that situation, I couldn't move or do anything. My mind just went to kid brain, and I hid underneath the blanket I was using. I called the parents, crying, and told them to come back immediately. When they came, the energy in the room lightened, and I finally came out from under the blanket. She was gone. They asked what was wrong and what happened, and I told them it didn't matter because they wouldn't believe me. I then informed them to find another babysitter because I would not be returning. I still wonder about the kids. I hope they ended up okay. They moved out of that house at the end of the year, but I'm not sure if what I saw was attached to them or not. I'm still not sure what I saw. Anyway, thanks for listening if you made it this far. Sorry if it seems so scrambled. I still have nightmares about the girl, and it's still a really frightening event to me. "12 years ago, we moved into a very haunted apartment. For context, I will need to go further back in the timeline, as my stepson was a huge component of the story. These stories about my stepson were relayed to me from my husband. I believe my stepson, as a child, was sensitive to ghosts, paranormal, and whatever else. An accident happened when my stepson was a baby at another haunted apartment, where he woke up in the middle of the night, crying like he was hurt in his crib. My husband and his mom noticed 3 scratches on his back. Of course, this can be explained, yet my husband insisted that those scratches were not there prior to putting him to sleep. Another strange phenomenon is that almost every photo of my stepson had some orb near him. Of course, this can be explained, yet there were photos of just his foot in the background and a well-placed orb near his foot. No matter the location of the photo, 90% of the photos we had of him had this weird orb. Now jumping back 12 years ago, we had found an apartment to rent. We had terrible credit, and the landlord gave us a chance. We were excited as the apartment was in a relatively decent part of town, and also to be getting our own space as we'd been living with my mom. One thing I remember when the landlord first showed us the apartment is that he said he had to do extensive renovations to it as the previous tenants destroyed the place. The first month, I started noticing small shadows from the 2 bedrooms out of the corner of my eyes. I chalked it up to just exhaustion because I had my then 1-year-old son. Things grew more intense when I put my 1-year-old down for a nap and decided to shower. I left the door open that led from the single bathroom to my bedroom, just in case my 1-year-old woke up. As I was showering, I felt as though someone was watching me. When I opened my eyes, I see a black shadow run past the door. My 1-year-old started crying hysterically. I got out of the shower and looked around the house, convinced someone broke in. I checked the front door, and everything was locked. A month or so passed from this incident. My 2 stepkids, 7 and 8 at the time, would come 1 day a week on some weekends. Their room was relatively unused. I started hearing their sliding wood closet doors knock, and a strange rotten egg smell coming from their room. I searched high and low for the source of the smell, but I never found anything. My mother-in-law had stayed over a few times and would tease that the kids must have left an egg salad sandwich somewhere. My husband heard the knocking at some point, yet chalked it up to the air conditioning kicking on. One weekend, my husband was out of town for work, and I was alone with all the kids. I had gotten them all to sleep and had decided to stay up and watch Ghost Adventures. I was laying on the couch when I happened to look up and see my stepson standing by the couch with his eyes closed. I immediately realized he was sleepwalking, which happened from time to time. He started mumbling about an old scary man in his closet. I stupidly figured he was having a nightmare and guided him back to his bed. As I started to walk out of the room, my stepson sat up in bed and mumbled again, "The old man in the closet is looking at me." I looked over to see the closet open. and instantly got creeped out. Then my stepson said, "He's going to knock." Then 3 quick knocks happened. Immediately, the smell of rotten eggs got heavy in the room. I flicked the lights on and guided my stepson to my bedroom. I was freaking out internally because my stepdaughter was on the bunk in that room sleeping, and I did not want to leave her alone. I got all the kids into my bed and stayed up until I no longer could fight sleep. I'm not really religious, but I asked my mother for some advice on what to do. She said to pray over the rooms and get oil on my fingers and place crosses over each door frame. I did exactly what she told me to. That night, I had a terrible nightmare that my mom was possessed. In the nightmare, she had died a gruesome death that I was made to watch. I woke up hysterically crying. I wanted nothing more than to be able to just move, but it was not an option. After this, the activity in the apartment calmed, yet one new thing started happening. One night, I woke up to my bed shaking. It felt as though someone had placed their knees against our mattress and was shaking it. As soon as I tried to wake my husband up to see if he felt it, it would immediately stop. This would happen weekly. For context, my 1-year-old son slept in a toddler bed in front of our bed. One night, my 1-year-old and I were up in the living room. My husband went to bed early, as he had to go to work early the next day. He came out looking upset and said to stop allowing our 1-year-old to come into the room because he was shaking the bed. I told him our son never went into the room. As soon as I finished that sentence, the glass cover to the entryway light, which was right behind me, came crashing down. My husband stood there, sleepily trying to process everything. He finally was feeling and seeing the things I'd been dealing with. One day, a house nearby was for rent, and we moved out. We were at this apartment for less than a year. We never experienced anything like what we'd experienced in that apartment. I felt relief because I was worried that whatever was in this place might attach itself to us. My stepson passed away in 2019 due to possible COVID. I had told him the story prior to his passing when he was in his teens, and he claimed to not remember the incident in the apartment. I fully believe he saw whatever entity was in that apartment. When I was little, maybe around 7 or so, I had my first paranormal experience. My mom always told me that she felt like I attracted things from the spiritual realm even as a baby. But this experience is the first one that is my own memory, and I remember it vividly. I'm now 26 years old. My mom was unlucky enough to have not only my father die, but also my little sister's father. My dad passed away due to a car accident, and my sister's father ended himself after a battle with severe depression. Needless to say, my mom had it pretty rough, and being a single working mother, she would often take us to a family friend who babysat us while she worked late nights at the hospital. The woman who babysat us was a warm, kind, and gentle woman named Rhonda. She always took the best care of us, and my sister and I really enjoyed staying with her. Rhonda had 2 birds who we loved to talk to, and they would repeat simple things like, "Hello" and "What's up?" We thought it was the coolest thing. After a long day of playing, my sister and I were off to bed, and Rhonda tucked me into my bed in her spare room downstairs. My sister was still pretty little, and she slept in the same room as Rhonda because she was too scared to sleep alone. And Rhonda was like a grandma to us, who was more than happy to share her bed if we got scared. I was a big girl and loved having my own room to sleep in, and I was never scared. On this night, though, I was having trouble falling asleep. and I just kept tossing and turning, growing frustrated that I wasn't asleep. And for some reason, I began to get anxiety and become fearful. I didn't know why I was scared, but I was. After what felt like forever of me laying there, contemplating getting up and crawling into Rhonda's bed, I heard something in a low, calm, male voice say, "Marissa, it's okay. Just go to sleep." This surprised me, but it didn't scare me. I believe that as a child, you're more open and susceptible to paranormal things due to the fact that you're not conditioned to be fearful yet. With age, you learn what's scary and all the things that go bump in the night that you should run away from. But I was still so innocent that I didn't register this as threatening. Actually, this calmed me down, and I started to feel very tired and just accepted what the voice told me and went to sleep. The next morning, Rhonda made us breakfast as she always did. She sat across from me and sipped her coffee that I always ask for a sip of, because if I wasn't already a strange child, I also had a taste for coffee. She asked me how I slept, and I told her that I was scared and that someone told me to go to sleep. She looked at me confused, and she asked me if I had a dream that someone was talking to me, and I told her no, I was awake. She said it was probably the birds talking, and again, I told her I was sure it wasn't. She then asked me if it was a man's voice or a woman's voice, and when I instantly said it was a man's voice, her face changed from the usual cheery warm expression to put off and uncomfortable. I had never seen her face look like that before, and I think that's why I remember this so vividly. She changed the subject quickly, and we went about our day, and I didn't think about that again for years. Fast forward into my teens. My mom and I were having a discussion about the paranormal because I had a lot of strange activity happening, and she asked me what the first experience I remember was. I shared the story about the man's voice at Rhonda's house and how odd Rhonda's reaction was, and my mom looked at me and her eyes widened a bit. Now, Rhonda went a little MIA a few years later, and unfortunately, she just slowly lost contact with us, and eventually she was no longer a part of our lives. I hadn't seen her in years. When my mom collected her thoughts, she looked at me and said, "Marissa, you know Rhonda's son died in that room, right?" I did not. I knew she had a son who passed away of a tragic overdose, but I was so young and never met him, so I didn't think about it. I looked back at my mom, and we didn't have to say anything. We both were thinking the same thing. If I was hearing a spirit speak to me, there's a good chance it could have been her son. From what my mom said about him, he was a very kind and caring person, much like his mom. Maybe that's why I wasn't afraid when if he spoke to me. I'm not saying that this is factually what happened, but it does make me wonder. The voice I heard was real, that much I do know. Regardless of who it belonged to, it's sure to me that much is true. Since that experience, I've had many, many more, and unfortunately, they got much more sinister as I got older. It got very, very dark for a while, and I witnessed things that you usually only see in horror movies. I still think of this experience often, and I hope that you enjoyed listening to my testimony. If you did enjoy this story, I also share my experiences as well as other strange and unusual things on my YouTube channel. My handle is Marissa White. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this. And remember, the spirit realm is just as real as you or I. This is one of many stories that I have from working night shift at a laundromat in a bad area. It's definitely the freakiest. So, for context, My mom took a job years ago at a local laundromat because we knew the owner and needed extra money. I was around 10 when she got the job, and she allowed me to come with her because she would give me a little allowance for helping her do small tasks. I ended up going with her every night for years, and as I got older, I mainly went to make sure my mom was safe because I was worried about her. We regularly dealt with angry customers refusing to leave, most of which were drunk or high, and we had to call the police a few times. My mom was always worried about me tagging along, but I insisted, and to this day, I still can't say I regret it. A lot of good came out of it, mainly the work experience, and that made up for how intense it could be. I had a lot of interesting stories from that time, but this one takes the cake for the most horrifying, and it took place when I was about 12. Being the young and dumb kid that I was, I designated myself the job of chasing people off when it was closing time. We would have people parking behind the building pretty regularly, so I would walk to the side of the building and start yelling that they were now trespassing and that I'd call the cops if they didn't leave. I feel that this is important to bring up because I now realize that I let any shady person hanging around the building at night know of my presence, and that's a dangerous thing to do when you're a 12-year-old girl. I was blissfully unaware that anything could happen to me until one night when we showed up to find that the door lock had been broken. My mom had unlocked the building that morning, so it wasn't like this was a break-in attempt since it had been unlocked all day. We were a bit shaken up, but my mom texted her boss to let him know about it. She told me to tell her if I saw anyone pull up. After about 30 minutes, I finished my few tasks and sat down to draw in my sketchbook. I had barely been sat down for a few minutes when I heard the door swing open, which startled me because normally people just knock when they see the closed sign. My mom noticed it too and yelled out that we were closed. I heard an older man's voice respond, explaining that he'd just come in to use our drink machine. We normally let people in to use our snack and drink machines. So my mom told him he had a few minutes and went back into the closet to grab something. I was sat about 7 feet away from the drink machine, so I heard him walk up, but didn't really pay much attention to him. I continued to draw until I started getting the feeling that someone was watching me, and I realized I didn't hear this guy put any money into the drink machine. I nervously glanced to my left and saw a tall man in his mid-60s staring right at me with a big smile on his face. I jumped a bit, but forced an awkward smile back at him and directed my attention back to drawing. As soon as I did this, I heard what sounded like shuffling, and when I looked over again, he was closer. I didn't know what to do, so I tried to just not look at him, but every time I would look away, he would shuffle closer. His body was still facing the drink machine, but his neck was craned in my direction, and he wouldn't stop smiling and staring. I began shaking and panicking, and my eyes were darting back and forth between him and the closet door, while I tried to plan a fast escape. I went to reach for my knife in my bag because I couldn't even imagine this man's intentions, and I quickly realized that it was not there. I'd left my knife at home when I needed it the most, and I was petrified. I decided to just stare back at him, despite being terrified and trembling violently, and after what felt like an eternity, he suddenly broke eye contact and yelled to my mom to have a good night before turning around and walking out. Relief hit me instantly, and I tried to calm myself down after what had just happened. I thought I was finally safe and started to get up to go splash some water on my face when I saw him sit down on the bench outside. Panic and dread hit me like a brick, and I sprinted into the closet to hide. I filled my mom in on everything, and she told me to run to the car and she'd get between me and him, and that she'd pepper spray him if needed. I did as she told me and ran to the car, and as I passed him, he stood up and began walking toward the car. My mom yelled at him to get away from it, and his reaction was to try to calmly start a conversation about the make and model of her car, all while staring right at me. She ignored him, hopped in the car, locked us in, and started backing up as quickly as she could. I ducked down in my seat, but I could still see him standing there, and I know he could see me because I watched as he lifted his hand and waved me goodbye before walking around to the back of the building and disappearing into the darkness. I felt sick. I couldn't sleep that night, and I never dared set foot anywhere near the back of that building again. So I guess that was a lesson learned. So, creepy, old, smiling man, let's not meet again. When I was in my first year out of school, my older brother and I moved into a small 2-story apartment in Scarborough, Western Australia. It was relatively cheap and in a great location, with the only drawback being the apartment seemed half-finished in places. There were quite a few outdoor areas that were crumbling away, and even some of the walls in the upstairs area had sections of the wall unpainted. We were apparently the first tenants since a renovation. Our parents would come and stay with us from time to time, and we still talk about our weird experiences in that place today. It always had an eerie feeling to it, with random rooms at odd angles and a very uncomfortable aura, for lack of a better word. The biggest feeling I had at the time was that I always felt like I was going to look down the staircase from the top living area and see someone run past. I don't know why I even thought that, but my parents said it was one of the first things that I said to them about the place. It all started one Friday night when I was staying home with my mom. We were both sitting on the couch watching TV at about 9 p.m. with only the lampshade and kitchen light on. We both felt something really odd that I've never felt before or since, like all the air was getting sucked out of the room, or there was a pressure change or something similar. We felt like we couldn't move, and it was like we were stuck in place. A shadow then appeared on the wall to the back left of the TV. It was about the size of a small person, but almost just looked like a blob in a vague shape of a human. It moved diagonally up the wall to the left, as if it were climbing a set of stairs. It then disappeared, and we spent the rest of the night in hysterics, leaving the house until my brother and dad returned a few hours later. What must have been a few weekends later, another encounter occurred. I had just been at the cinemas watching a film with some friends. The film was White Noise, and it was based on hearing ghosts speak to you through the static of an untuned radio. It was a pretty average movie, but an interesting idea. That night, while asleep in bed, my clock radio turned on max volume right next to my head at about 1 a.m. It was 10 seconds of chaos as I tried to turn off the radio alarm, but nothing was turning off the sound. In my half-asleep state, I didn't think to pull it out of the wall. After about 10 seconds, it finally turned off. I somehow went back to sleep, but I remember at the time knowing that it was the scariest thing that had ever happened to me, and that I had just encountered something. The next morning, I woke up to find the cord for the alarm clock in the middle of the room under my bed, nowhere near the wall. Not long after that encounter, we had some friends around for some drinks in our main living room, and there was another incident. An old CD player of my brother's was sitting on the table, and all of a sudden it turned on at max volume. It was playing some weird Indian sitar-sounding music. Needless to say, it scared the hell out of everyone in the room, if not only because of the loud noise out of nowhere. At another point during the night, the sound of a girl screaming came from upstairs and was eventually explained away by one of my friends as coming from a neighbor's house, even though it felt like it was directly above us. Another instance occurred on an evening when my mom was staying with us and my brother and dad were away. We had a table tennis table in our garage that was connected to the house through the laundry room. I had fallen asleep on the couch and woke up at about 2 a.m. I went to the laundry to have a drink of water from the tap, and I could hear people playing tennis beyond the door to the garage. I was frozen in fear. I put my ear right up to the door, and I could hear the sounds of a game being played, but I knew that my mom and myself were the only ones in the apartment. I retreated and went to bed, knowing that I was too weak to open the door and confront whatever was in there. I somehow fell asleep. The next morning I woke up and went downstairs for breakfast. The first thing my mom said to me is, "How late were you and your friends up playing table tennis last night?" I got up to go to the toilet at 3 a.m. and I could hear a game going on in there. So that was pretty spine-tingling. The last story that I can think of at the moment is when I was at a friend's house one night. I received a phone call from my brother who was at home. As I answered, he said, "How drunk are you? I can hear you rattling the keys in the door." I explained that I was at a friend's house, to which he replied, "Shit," and he hung up. He calls me back 5 minutes later and explained that as soon as he hung up, he heard what sounded like a large animal run along the side of the house from the front, along the side fence, and within seconds was knocking aggressively at the back door. He went to the back door, and there was nothing there. Does anyone have any ideas as to what we are dealing with? The most haunted road in New Jersey, Clinton Road. This was a couple of years ago. I was still in college. I worked at my local high school in South Jersey on the night shift for some extra money, but unfortunately the hours meant I didn't really get to have a life during the week. I get a call from my friend group on a Friday before I headed into work, saying they were going to explore Clinton Road, which was known to be the scariest road in New Jersey. Obviously, I couldn't go, so I told them to let me know how they made it out. Later in the night, I get a call from them in panic, saying all these crazy things happened to them. They described what happened to them, how they threw their coins over Ghost Boy Bridge, and they came back. A ghost truck following them, and the feeling of being watched. I thought they were just hyping it up because I missed out. So it was decided we'd all go the next night, but this time, I got to see it for myself, something I'd regret for the rest of my life. Us being from South Jersey, Clinton Road is a bit of a drive for us, about 2 hours, so there was plenty of time for us to get all hyped up and spooked out. Now, I can only describe myself as the manly man of the group, being 6'5", 260. Especially back then, I had the persona of, it's all made up. Nothing will scare us. Boy, was I wrong. Right when we got there, the entire vibe changed from, "Oh, we're all gonna be spooked," to, "Oh, wait, this is actually pretty damn creepy." The road is in the middle of the woods, houses few and far between. The first thing we see when we get there is a small mini-castle-looking building is the best I can describe it. And because of the far ride, we all had to pee. So I went to the left. My friend Joe went straight, and my friend Har went to the right. Friend 4 was a female who stayed behind us in the road. After I was done, I immediately walked back along with Har, but we noticed Joe walking towards the creepy building. I start shouting, asking what he's doing. He turns back around with a look of shock. Me being completely confused, I ask what he's doing walking there. Joe swore up and down that I was actually behind the building, waving at him to follow me in. So naturally, we're all getting freaked out. We pull up to the bridge, and I check everyone for coins to make sure they don't fake it, just to scare me. We all throw the coins, Nothing happens. Ah, see guys, it's all in your head. Let's go, I say. So we all start walking back to the car. Cling, cling, cling. I hear the coins hit the road. We sprint back to check, and we find the coins laying in the road. I was 100% convinced they were just messing with me, so I had the idea to mark a coin so they couldn't fake it. We threw the coin in the water, waited 5 minutes in silence. Nothing. See guys, let's go. Cling, cling, cling. I hear the coins in the road. I walk back. I'll be damned. It was a coin with the exact same markings I'd put on it. I'm extremely freaked out at this point, so we decide to go. Driving down the windy road in a newer sports car, we are all freaked and just want to leave. We see headlights appear behind us, seemingly out of nowhere. We didn't see them attached to a vehicle. I'm no car expert, but I bet my life they were lights of an old truck. Getting closer the faster we went, taking bends at fast speeds that even a new truck wouldn't be able to handle. Suddenly, the lights disappear. So now, all in a panic, we decide to pull over to map our way out. Dead silence. No light except our headlights in the woods. We then hear the typical female ghost moan, and of course what came with it was the typical woman in white dress standing in the woods right next to our car, and she let out the loudest scream I've ever heard. We're screaming at this point to get out of Dodge. Once we make it back to the main roads, we decide to dig a little deeper on this road. Apparently the ghost truck tries to make people crash on Dead Man's Curve. There have been numerous bodies buried there from the famous murderer, the Iceman. On our way home, we were so ballsy and wanted to go back again the next night. We suddenly pass an old rundown church that looks like it hasn't been used in 50 years. And of course, the sign left out front, "You need Jesus on Sunday." Safe to say that I never went back, and even up to this day, my friend groups still refuse to talk about what happened that night on Clinton Road. This is the story about how 3 US Marines were scared shitless within only a few hours, including myself. I have a friend who's really into the paranormal, like myself, Jake. It was October 2018, and we just wanted to go ghost hunting or explore supposedly haunted buildings and areas. We had been researching and decided our drive limit was 4 hours. I came across a place called the Devil's Tramping Ground. At the place, there's a circle in the woods that can't grow grass, and the trees make a circle around it. As the legend has it, the devil himself uses that circle of sand and dirt as a portal. He comes to Earth at night and stomps on the ground, pacing back and forth. We read that if you try to sleep there, on the circle, you will hear a soothing female singing, which will put you to sleep, and then you will wake up in a different location. So what did we do? Brought tents, sleeping bags, chairs, and beer, of course. Okay, back to the story. Jake and I were planning our trip, and another one of my buddies caught wind of it. My buddy's name was Nick. We were all set to go on Friday when we got out of work. We left base at around 4 p.m. and didn't hit the road until roughly 8 p.m. because we kept getting sidetracked at different stores. I'll skip right to the good part. We get off the highway. It's close to midnight. We have our GPS on, and it wants us to go down the only damn road with no streetlights. Of course, we start driving down that narrow, dark road slowly, so we can find the clearing for the Devil's Tramping Ground. We read that there would be satanic symbols in front of the clearing written on the road. We had our eyes peeled. There was something odd about this road. I shit you not, we were being chased the entire way by about 10 dogs and 1 black dog. Every dog was barking except for that black dog. He kept appearing in the woods to the left of us and in front of us as we were driving, as if he was trying to turn us around. We found the symbols and knew it was there. The dogs hadn't followed us that far. We parked and got out with flashlights to scope out the area. I'm not gonna lie, it was extremely unsettling. We made our way up to the circle and thought, perfect, let's go get our shit. Fast forward about an hour. It's quiet. We have our tents set up in a circle with our chairs set up surrounding our cooler. We were just telling ghost stories and drinking. Nothing really seemed to bother us other than the occasional twig snapping that sounded like footsteps and the feeling of being watched. We just chalked it up to the animals. It's 2 a.m. now. I start to hear voices all around me, and I'm not the only one. Nick and Jake heard it too. It felt like we were about to be jumped by a group of men surrounding us, but we knew whatever it was wasn't human. The voices stopped, and I shit you not, at the same time, the car light turned on. We went to the car to find all of the doors open. Unnerved, we slowly closed all the doors and went back to drinking. 2:30 a.m. comes along. We're all on edge. We're not even drunk at this point because of the events that just took place. Everyone was silent. I could hear and feel my heart beating out of my chest. You'll never believe it. We all heard beautiful humming coming from every direction. I wish I could describe how it sounded, but we knew that was not good. We all leaned as the singing was going on. Without one word spoken, we all got up and went to the car and got out of there. We then visited Lydia's bridge because it was nearby, and it said that Lydia walks the road on the bridge at night. We didn't see anything, and we slept in a nearby Walmart parking lot in the car. We went back the next morning to collect our things. I thought you guys might enjoy this. I visited a house this week for work. Here in England, most of our houses are built in the late Victorian to early 20th century period, but sometimes older houses are still standing. Occasionally, I'll see an 18th century house, and once I did a job on a remote island in the English Channel, where the farmhouses had parts which dated from the late 17th century. I'd been doing my job for a long time, and this week I was scheduled to inspect the oldest house I'd ever worked on, built in the 1500s. The owner is there to let me in, and after a quick chat, she leaves me to get on with my job. The house is vacant, and no one has lived there for a few years or so. Lovely bright sunshine, and in the middle of a hot afternoon. I start to look around the ground floor and small basement. The house is detached on a big plot, but there are other houses and people around, and this is a nice suburban neighborhood that I'm very familiar with. I go upstairs and try to get into the loft. In the end, deciding that the floors are too uneven for my ladder, and that I don't want to move the owner's furniture in order to get up there. So far, no spookiness. Bear in mind that I'm in empty old houses all the time, and almost never feel anything weird. I'm not one of these people who thinks that they can commune with the dead or anything. Open the curtains and open the windows of most haunted houses, and the scare factor is removed. Anyway, after about 40 minutes, I'm nearly ready to go and have finished my job before I realize that I haven't been in the back bedroom yet. There are 5 bedrooms upstairs, and I've only been in 4 of them. I'm not expecting to see anything that I haven't seen in the other rooms, but I should really give a cursory once-over of each room to do my job properly. I head back down the hallway and go to the back bedroom. You already know what's coming next. Nothing weird with the decor of the room. It has the same wallpaper and carpet as the rest of the house, same little timber-framed window and a single bed. I think so many ghost stories rely on full rooms of spiders, coffins, or spooky kids' dolls or whatever. But this just looks like all the other rooms in the house. On the threshold, I get a strong feeling that I'm not welcome. I don't feel cold, but I'm aware that in this room, it isn't a bright summer's day anymore. I scan the room from the doorway, and I'm very aware that I should not enter. I daren't look in the mirror because my intuition tells me that I won't like what I see. I turn and leave back down the corridor, and it's a lovely sunny day again. Tension is lifted. I go back into the garden to say goodbye to the owner, who has been outside the whole time pottering around the garden. We make some small talk about the house, and as I'm trying to politely leave, the owner, out of nowhere, cheerfully says, "Oh yes, and we have a ghost, of course." Before she says anything else, I point to the window of the back bedroom and say, "In this room, right?" She laughs and says, "Yes, of course," and then tells me how when she was growing up in the house, that whoever slept in this room would report that the ghost of a young woman would tell them stories in the night. A little story time. I'm of Japanese descent, and each year I go visit my family in the north of Japan, and also do the Oban, which is basically like Dia del Muerte in Japan, when the spirit of the dead come visit the land of the living. During this period, I decided to go visit Tokyo a little, and long story short, after walking for a while out of the city, I began climbing a nearby mountain to discover a substantially sized cemetery. Being a young lad of 16 at the time, I decided I'd go exploring and see which families are interred here. It was about 3 p.m., and it was scorching, and the trees here and there in the cemetery bore a welcoming shade for me to cool down a little. After about 10 minutes or so of looking around the very old stone slabs, I realized a few odd details. First, it seems I somehow got lost in the cemetery. Mind you, I have an excellent sense of geolocalization, and I found my way out of many a forest, mountains, airport, and such. The cemetery itself was lower in the middle part, and surrounded by woods, so I think I was in the lower part because the horizon was only tombs. Secondly, it was getting dark. As I said before, it was around 3 p.m., so that was very odd, and the surroundings had that yellowish tinge you get at dusk. If I make a small cultural parenthesis, dusk is called tasogaridoki in Old Japanese, and it's supposed to be the in-between moment when strange things occur. Not a good time to be surrounded by tombs. Third, I was getting a little cold, not like I was plunged into an icy pool, but more like when you're in the middle of the mountains and you can feel some coldness through the gaps of your coat. After that, I began to see some weird shadows or something in the corner of my eyes. Very weird, because I wasn't feeling panicked or anything. I could calmly observe them. It was moving like old lava lamps, very deliberately, and sometimes looked a bit human-shaped or like huge faces. I was walking toward it because I thought if it can harm me physically, I can certainly punch it. But it was like a mirage and it was fluttering. After a while, I started to feel like I was in danger. I was getting colder and colder, and at this moment, I saw a monk who was very surprised to see me there, because the cemetery was supposed to be closed at this hour. He brought me back to the entrance, and I told him it was open when I got in. He informed me that he was next to it all day, and he didn't see me pass by. I assumed he thought I went in by a fraction, so I told him everything I saw and felt. He seemed very surprised at first, and then told me to look at the hour. It was 6:10 p.m. That means I was in there for like 3 hours. He then told me I shouldn't come here while the sun is setting, that I could have been taken away by Kamikakushi. Anyway, that was my very weird experience there. The cemetery was east of Kyoto, near the Shokunzuka mountain. So I've been holding on to this experience for about a year now, and I've decided to share it with you guys, mostly to get it off of my chest. I work in a deep underground potash mine. For anyone who's never experienced what it's like to be several thousand feet underground, it's a very uncanny experience. There's no natural lighting, and usually the only artificial light comes from your cap lamp or any vehicles you're operating. You can hear the earth shift and the vast weight above you slowly bear down on the tunnel you're working in. I've been working underground for about 6 months and was being sent to an abandoned part of the mine to make it safe enough for crews to be sent in to recover some equipment and machinery that had been left behind. The area I was being sent to was infamous for being the location a mine operator called Chris had been killed by being pinched in between 2 pieces of equipment and having his torso split in half. This accident had shaken a lot of the guys underground, and many refused to work in that area again. So as the junior operator, I was the unlucky bastard that had to go in. I was sent in by myself to get the job started and was supposed to get another operator to come help me once I was ready. The beginning tunnel had so much potash dust piled up over the years that it reached my knees and made it impossible to see while driving in my bolter. A bolter is a vehicle that drives 8-foot metal bolts into the ceiling to prevent the ceiling from caving in. I remember feeling so uneasy while I was in there. It was like I wasn't supposed to be there. Once I got to my first location to start bolting, I began setting everything up. I was setting up bolts when I noticed a moving light come from the opposite end of the tunnel from where I'd entered. I initially thought it could be another worker that was also doing work in that tunnel, so I started doing cap lamp signals. It's our own form of sign language with our lights so we can communicate. I signaled for whoever's light that was to come towards me. Once I made that signal, the light stopped moving and after a few seconds disappeared. I was becoming worried and tried to reason to myself what the light could be. It really couldn't have been another worker because it wasn't safe to go any farther until my work was done. It couldn't have been a piece of equipment because it responded to my light. I was terrified and honestly didn't know what to do. I was scared to attempt to leave because my bolter kicked up so much dust, but I also didn't want to go by foot because I'd only have my cap lamp for lighting. I decided to stay camped inside my bolter until my backup arrived. The light never returned, and when my coworker arrived, I gained enough confidence to finish the job and leave. I don't know what I saw, but I can't help but think it's the soul of Chris. The idea of his soul being trapped in that tunnel really bothers me, and I actually left the underground for a surface position, partially because of this encounter. When I was 10 years old, I saw something that to this day, 6 years later, I cannot still understand at all. My friends and I were outside playing, enjoying our time together, and on this random day with my friends Nate and Donnie, we saw an old school, completely white double-decker bus drive past the road we were walking on, and we just stood still in utter confusion because the way this bus came into our area was impossible. It physically couldn't drive into the area without driving through the entrance first, and it definitely did not do this. For some context, the area I live in has one-way access, meaning the way you come in is the way you have to go out when you want to leave. Inside of the bus, there were 2 people. A male driver dressed as if he was in the 1920s. He was strangely completely white too, snow-colored hair with all white clothes, but he wasn't the most interesting person on this bus. There was a woman extremely similar to him in that she was completely all white too, but she was a passenger and she was acknowledging us, waving at us. I was completely dumbfounded. I just stood there in awe. I know it doesn't sound like it was that much of a spectacle, but I can't explain it. This bus had an aura that was completely captivating. These people on the bus did not seem threatening at all. They seemed benevolent and had a feeling of warmth about them. This whole situation must have lasted maybe 5 seconds at most. It was a lot to take in such a short amount of time. And out of nowhere, as the bus went past us, it just suddenly disappeared. I can't explain it. It didn't fade away. It just disappeared. I never told anyone about this until I recently told my mother, and unlike me, she's very much a believer in the supernatural, and she told me that around the same time she had a dream about her late mother, who had died a month before I was born, telling her that she had to go, that she had a bus to catch. I know it's a far-fetched theory to assume it was my grandmother, and I don't even know if I believe it in all honesty. But all I do know is that I definitely saw something that day, and whatever it was wasn't normal as we know normal. Does anyone with more knowledge on these supernatural things have any theories on what my friends and I saw that day? So, my husband took me to the Stanley for my birthday. We stayed only one night. When we got there, we joined this ghost tour that they had going on, and they talked about the history of the hotel and whatnot. I left during the tour to go to the bathroom. I come back, and the tour is pretty much done. No biggie, right? Fast forward to the butt crack of dawn. I'm the lightest sleeper on earth, and I hear this loud scratching at our door, and I'm immediately wide awake. It stops after about 20 seconds, and I lay back down, and a few seconds later, the scratching starts again. I sit up in bed and was weirded out, because to get to our room, you had to go through this corridor where our room was, and furthermore, you had to have a key pass to get through that first door, so it wasn't like you could just walk up to our door or anything. And there was nothing outside our door when we went to bed. The scratching was loud and sounded like claws on the door, and you could tell it was coming from the bottom part of the door. I woke my husband up finally and asked if he could hear that scratching on the door. The scratching stopped the second he woke up. He thought I was crazy and left. He said it was probably people outside, and I said no, it was coming from the door. I was adamant that it was the door, because I got close enough to know it was the door. I could hear it as clearly as I could hear him. He said I was just looking for a reason to be scared by a ghost, so I must have imagined it. I was getting annoyed because I never mentioned anything about a ghost. All I said is that there was a loud scratching at the door, and I was wondering what it could possibly be because we're in a corridor. And it sure as hell wasn't people outside our door. I was dumbfounded and irritated because I had no clue what it was. It was bothering me. What was it? I didn't imagine it. The next morning, when we went to check out, I asked the worker what could possibly be scratching at my door that early in the morning. His eyes got big, and he went and got another worker who worked there for a long time. I told him everything, and he said it was a ghost dog that used to wake people up at the crack of dawn by scratching at their door. My husband chimes in, "Oh yeah, you were in the bathroom when the guy was talking about the ghost dog." I almost choked my husband out. I grew up in a small town. My house is one of the oldest ones in the town. We live right beside 3 sets of train tracks. Growing up, I've always heard voices. My friend heard them too in my house. They weren't regular voices. It's hard to explain, but if she didn't hear them with me, I would have passed it off as my imagination. It was only words here and there, but they came across like a dream. We heard them, but we knew they weren't there. It was like a fast car zooming by. It was always a man, and we never knew what exactly he was saying. It was a regular occurrence when I was growing up, that stuff would fly off the back of the toilet and hit the opposite wall in our bathroom. My mom finally told them to shut up, and it stopped. When I was about 12, my parents and my brother went to my brother's hockey game at the local arena. I stayed at home and had a bath. Our bathroom was on the left of the hallway, with the washer and dryer on the right, and a door leading to an old office room that had stairs going to the basement. I was having my bath. I heard heavy boot steps come up the stairs towards the back door. All of a sudden they stopped, and then they were outside of the bathroom door. It sounded like something either kicked or punched the washing machine. It was loud. I was so scared I got dressed and ran away to a friend's house without leaving a note. I got used to the big guy and found out through a silhouette there was a woman in the house as well. She's not nice and hangs around the stairs. Even now, at 31 years of age, if I go up the stairs at my parents' house, I always have this horrible feeling that someone is behind me and wants to pull me down. I have never had that feeling anywhere else. My nephew is autistic and would talk to the ghosts. When my nephew was 4, he told my mom that the man's name is Sonny and that Sonny watches us. He told her that if we wanted to see Sonny, we would have to go down to the basement and dig. Sonny died falling on the train tracks. He doesn't like the woman and won't go up the stairs alone, so I don't know much about her, other than that she is not nice. I have many, many more experiences, but I think I'm done for now. I hope you enjoyed that. On a fairly busy road last night at about 8:45, there was a human figure, I think a woman, standing almost to the white line to the point that I had to move to not hit them. A German shepherd at her side, and the dog was bouncing, but she was completely unmoving, shoulders hunched forward, face slightly down and tilted, white hair down past her shoulders, dark clothes that were more like shrouds. The clothes looked like they were a pair of clothes or blankets somehow. It's really hard to explain. The dog was also kind of pulling or being restrained by what I assumed was a leash, though I didn't see a leash or the lady's hand. But the lady didn't move at all. Not an arm, not a shoulder, nothing. Totally still. In that first flash of a second, I'm thinking this person is mentally ill or on drugs. But this is the part I cannot get over, and my 15-year-old daughter saw it too. This person had no face. It was a completely white void that was 100% not a mask or covering anything else. This person was actually faceless. There was no dimension, shadow, texture, definition, nothing. Just blank, pure white. That was just empty. I'm truly certain what I saw was not a mask, hood, face paint, or some other costume or prank. I have never seen anything so messed up in my life. I wanted to turn around, to look again, but my other child was scared and crying from our reactions and begging me not to. So I didn't. She didn't see it like my other child and I did. I got home and posted on a social media unexplained phenomenon group for my state, and someone else had seen it and was also unnerved by it too, but they didn't see the blank face. Another person had called it into the police, saying the woman was just sitting with her back to the road as they drove by, and the police checked the area with no findings. I'm open to finding out more about this from people who may know. I've driven on this road thousands of times in the last couple of decades, and I've never seen or heard of. I was just talking to my uncle, who is a retired sailor, and he told me a story that I felt was perfect. My uncle used to work on board the Great Lakes freighter, the SS Arthur M. Anderson, and they would haul iron ore and limestone across the Great Lakes. One day at around 7 p.m. in November of 2007, they were crossing Lake Superior on their way to Cleveland, Ohio, when they started receiving distress calls on their radio from an unknown vessel claiming to be the SS Edmund Fitzgerald. The SS Edmund Fitzgerald famously sank in 1975, taking all 29 crewmen with it. Well, he said at first they all thought it was some kind of distasteful prank until they checked the radar and found that there were no other ships around for at least 70 nautical miles, and the range on the radios are only 60 nautical miles. He said that the voice they heard from the radio described a heavy storm and high winds, and that they were having a hard time holding their own. My uncle said you could hear true fear in the man's voice from over the radio. But the thing was, there was no storm at all. In fact, the water was calm and the night was clear. At around 8 p.m., my uncle said that the distress calls on the radio came to an abrupt stop, leaving the whole room in a terrifying silence, and the radio stayed quiet for the rest of the night. Nobody was able to sleep that night, haunted by what they had witnessed. When it comes down to it, there is a sense of irony in this event, being as not only is the ship my uncle was on, the SS Arthur M. Anderson, the sister ship to the Edmund Fitzgerald, but it was also the last ship to make contact with the Edmund Fitzgerald in 1975, when she sank. Could my uncle and his shipmates have actually made contact with the ghosts of the crew of the Edmund Fitzgerald? Or could there be another explanation of this event? We'll never know, but it made one of the creepiest stories I've ever heard. I was posted in a primary healthcare center with a fellow senior doctor. It was our night shift, and he started to tell me stories of the time when he was doing autopsies in the same hospital. He was shifted to PHC later because he couldn't deal with the trauma that came later. He said that not all autopsies led to haunting, but it was people who killed themselves or cases of assault where the cause of death was unnatural that led to some of the most disturbing paranormal activities. One such case he narrated that night was of a woman in her mid-20s who was assaulted, then strangulated, and later her body was thrown into the well by her in-laws. Such incidents are common in rural areas of India. They hope to escape the charges, but after thorough examination of her lungs by my colleague, the senior doctor who did her autopsy, it was obvious that she was killed first and drowned later. The in-laws of this woman tried to pay a hefty amount to him so they could escape the charges, but he refused. After that incident, he said that he often saw the woman, wet hair, bulging eyes, naked with a white, pale body, often sitting by his bedside, just looking at him. He said it wasn't sleep paralysis. He was shattered when one time, as he was combing his hair in the bathroom mirror, and he saw that same woman just peeking at him through the door. Only her eyes and wet hair were visible through the mirror. It became so traumatic that he left that part of his profession completely, even though he was getting paid a lot for that job. He said he doesn't ever wish to go back. And the fact that it was the same hospital where I'm working right now, it's kind of creepy, I'm not gonna lie. I'm a singer, so late nights are common for me. This night, I was driving myself and 4 bandmates home from a show. It's about a 2-hour drive. We're jamming out to the radio and talking and everything is fine, until I get to the road that's over a big lake in our state. As soon as I hit that bridge, I felt uneasy. I didn't want to look like a weenie, so I didn't say anything to everyone else. until I saw the guy walking on the shoulder of the bridge, which is practically non-existent. I swerve a little to miss him, and the guys start asking if I was okay and why I swerved. When I said it was to miss the guy, everyone says, "What guy?" So I described him. He had on a dark jacket, camo cargo pants, dark shoes, and wet hair. No one saw him, and they laughed it off. I saw him again just a few feet ahead and pointed him out, but no one sees him. I'm freaking out because he's there. A few miles ahead, I see him again. This time my drummer sees him too, and he said I wasn't kidding and describes his face because he turned this time. He described exactly what I saw. I started driving faster, and he showed up every few miles. He'd turn his head and grin this scary-ass grin. I almost started crying. Anyway, once we got to the woods past the bridge, I thought we'd be fine, but he kept appearing until we got close to town. Then he was gone. I've never seen him again. That was one of the scariest ghost encounters I've had. His hair and clothes were wet, so I'm guessing it was the spirit of someone who drowned in the lake and is sticking around to mess with people. But he scared me pretty bad. My mom used to work night shift at a hospital before she retired. Years ago, she had a terrifying experience that she recently told me about. During one of her shifts, she had an elderly patient that was in the ICU getting ready to pass. Oftentimes, my mom would sit and visit with her patients during her downtime. The woman was crying, so my mom held her hand and asked what was wrong. While still crying, the woman said that he was here for her. She said that he was evil when he was alive, and he's still just as evil as now. Confused, my mom asked if the lady was talking about her husband. The woman told my mother her dead husband made her life a living hell, and now, on her deathbed, had been in her room for days tormenting her. He told her he was here to take her. She said he'd been standing in the corner of the room since she was admitted into the ICU. My mother offered to pray with the woman, which she accepted. The woman eventually passed, but it told my mother before she went that she no longer saw her husband and was able to go in peace. The common thread in almost all of these accounts is the lingering weight of the trauma. Whether it's an old house, a stretch of highway, or a deep underground mine, some experiences leave a mark. Talking about these events are often the only way people can find a bit of peace. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to their testimonies. If you've ever experienced something that completely defied your sense of reality, you're welcome to share it in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this, please like, comment, and share. It really helps. You can also check out my Spotify podcast. Stay safe out there. Until next time.